Going after certain types of offenses like crack cocaine, for example, and then later marijuana became fodder for really emasculating a whole segment of society, largely men of color, young men of color, disproportionately African American, disproportionately Latino men got caught up in this net. Now, were the rates of prevalence and incidence and rates of usage between, let's say, whites and African Americans and Latinos and Asians and whatever, were they different? No, they were largely the same. But the criminal prosecution focused on the inner city, in this case, Milwaukee, in the state of Wisconsin, obviously the largest inner city, focused on those populations. And as a result, they got caught up into this system. And where they really got caught up was not so much during the 90s. That's when it started. The train started to run real fast after 2000 with the passage of truth in sentencing. Now, individuals who were given sentences by a judge, you had to do 100% time. And you had to do a minimum of 25% on what they called extended supervision. So if you got a 10-year sentence, let's say, you did the full 10, plus 2.5 years minimally on extended supervision, you could be on paper for life. And this is the common complaint today among prisoners who served time in the 90s and those who got sentenced after 2000 under truth in sentencing is, I'm never going to get off correctional supervision. Or I will, but I'll be 90 or 80. So what you've done, in effect, is disenfranchise a whole segment of people who lose things as a result of the incarceration. They lose the right to vote. They lose the right to hold an occupational license. If they need a license, they lose the right to run for office. You've disenfranchised what we call civil death, particularly through the voting statutes. You know, down south, it's estimated in like Alabama, for example, 50% of African Americans will never be able to vote. Well, that's the new Jim Crow. But in Wisconsin, it became such a hyper issue in terms of its impact on the inner city. Its impact on Milwaukee was devastating because you send these young African American, Latino men disproportionately, you send them to prison, they're there for a long time, they come out and they got nothing. Now we're facing the backlash of that. People we sentenced 20 years ago are coming out disproportionately. They're what we call re-entry populations, the re-entering society. Well, what skill do they have? Half of all African American men who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s have done some time in the state of Wisconsin. That's horrific in terms of its impact. What if you're an African American woman and you want to marry an African American man? What's your eligible population? It's destroyed. They're in prison. They're gone. Right? What happens to the children of the people that these men have fathered? What happens to them? And what you build is this entrenched or ensconced cycle of criminality. One thing that I think would really affect these communities more positively is if we offered employment more so than we offered prison. Now that's a tough nut because it's a world economy. And Milwaukee lost well over 100,000 manufacturing jobs during the 80s and 90s. 150 probably thousand plus. Well, what do people do to live? Well, they work 2 jobs. They work 3 jobs. They get no benefits, right? And they're working on peanuts, $10 an hour, $9 an hour, right? Trying to raise their kids. How the hell are they going to do that? See, in the 1970s, in 1975, we had about 18, 20 homicides that year. Everybody had a job. There was Al's Chalmers, Allen Bradley, Kearney and Trecker, American Motors, A.O. Smith. Tens of thousands of jobs. So whether you were white, black, Latino, it didn't matter. You could save money. You could send your kids to college. You could take a vacation. You weren't rich, but you lived okay. That is gone for so many people now. And the gap between, again, rich and poor is just the city of Milwaukee. I mean, look at every indicator. The segregation, poverty, children in poverty is enormously high thing. Unemployment issues, underemployment, where people just say, fuck it, I give up. I'm not even going to try for a job. They're not even counted in the statistics. They're out. They're called underemployed. They're people who just gave up. Well, how do they live? They're living on the street, right? They're hustling on the street. They're living in a cash economy. They're doing those kinds of things to just make ends meet. But the distinctions and the contrasts are so glaring between a young African American male and man, or female as well, and a, let's say, young white male or female. The fact is that they live in literally black and white worlds.